That way I don't have to do more work. Okay,
Yeah.
other people do.
I heard an owl go doing that yesterday outside my house.
All right, well, let's pray and we'll get started here this morning. Good loving God, thank you for this time together in your word. Shower us with your promises, with your abundance of grace as we dive into the story of your people and especially your promises among them. We pray that you would not only encounter us in this space, but stay with us as we go with a sense of your gracious abundance, with an eye toward those who need that grace, and just a lens to see the world anew and afresh in this new year. And we pray that in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay. Let's get to, I think we'll go to our text. I'm trying to do I'll share. We'll go to our text from the gospel text, excuse me, for today. From John, and it'll be John 2, and this is the wedding at Cana, which is Jesus' first sign. And Pastor Bill was pointing out something from kind of I think is it Brown? Brown's
Raymond
comment?
Brown,
What's that?
Raymond Brown.
Raymond Brown, thank you. I couldn't remember his first name. Raymond Brown's commentary, which is pretty, famous on the book of John, how John's divided into signs and then into Jesus' signs and then Jesus' glory. However, I think we do see Jesus' glory in these signs as well, although in kind of a different way. So anyway, we're in the signs part, the first part of John. And this, by the way, is the first time, I don't know if it's the first time we encounter Mary. I think it is. If it's not the first time we encounter Mary, Jesus' mother, it's definitely the first time that she speaks at all. So all the stuff we have from Christmas about Mary, none of that is there in John. She just appears here. So take that for what it is, but she's going to get a couple of lines here. All right, let's take a look. Someone want to read on the screen from their Bible or something else?
On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that of you? Concern of that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone water jars for the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 or 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called to the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him.
Okay. Yeah, great, thank you. All right, layers upon layers in John. So what's standing out to you maybe in this text today?
One of my favorite things is the way Mary just does, is represented here is what she says.
Yeah.
Jesus says, my time has not yet come. We don't get anything that she says to him. She just says, just do what he says.
Yeah.
Tells the servants, just do what he says.
Yeah.
And he kind of says, "Okay, Mom."
Yeah,
It's like,
she doesn't argue with him, but she does
Yeah.
proceed with her agenda,
Yeah.
it seems, yeah.
that's something.
Mhm.
King James in the second part of verse 4 says, "And then Mary grabbed Jesus' ear."
Oh, sure it does. Boy.
Okay.
That's right, you had me for a second, well, half a second.
She grabbeth.
Yeah, if you would have said, I was, that's exactly what I was thinking was, if you would have said he grabbeth thou his thine lobe, lobeth, something like that. Yeah, what's standing out to you in the story? Good, bad, or confused, or,
I'm impressed by Mary's, always her understanding of who Jesus really is.
Mhm.
She's known that all along.
Yeah.
It just, and this confirms that she really understood who he is.
okay, yeah, so there's a little bit of a bracketing of faith, some might argue that at the end, the disciples believed. But that Mary, believed he could do
Yeah.
something. Now, some will say, did she want him to go to the store and grab another couple of bottles? Or, why is she saying they have no wine to him? Is she just concerned about the guest? Is she just nervous? Is she understanding who he is? Right, so yeah, we could, yeah, there's some speculation about that, but I tend to lean into the fact that she's coming to him for a reason here. That he can do something about this. Yeah, come on in. Yep, if you want to see the screen over here, but it's gonna be Bible verses mostly, so it's fine if you're in that side too. Yeah, but we've been filling up lately, I think.
Good problem to have.
Yeah,
Maybe some
yeah.
New Year's resolutions.
yeah, right. We're like the Y, but hopefully,
Yes, that's 2 weeks.
except that hopefully next week it won't be empty.
In fact, can I take a picture? This would be.
Yeah, yeah. I'm actually going to the Y today to join back up. I'm hoping that the riffraff is, the chat is blown away. Well, no, just the first of, anytime it's the new year, the YMCA just fills up.
Well, there's no joining fee.
There's no joining fee.
Until the 20th.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, really? It smells weird to you. It's probably the pool, maybe. I don't know.
Everybody look, say Manna.
Man, yep,
Or what you say is when you're gonna take a picture, you say, okay, 1, 2, 3, sneeze, and everybody laughs.
yeah. Yeah, I do the Hollywood, work it, own it, love it, yes, you're a tiger. That's always, usually gets people to laugh. Although I'm taking pictures of kids a lot, so usually I get pictures that are like this.
Yeah,
So corny,
or with their tongue out.
yeah. Yeah. Shout at the devil.
Well,
All
I
right.
wonder if some of the servants here
Yeah.
become some of the first disciples.
Well, yeah, so we don't, the servants are the ones that know, and this is important. Like in a lot of stories, the healing of Naaman, it's the servant girl that tells Naaman to go get healed. It's the servants that encourage him to do what the prophet says. So whenever you have those that are more on the bottom, who have the inside scoop, that's a sign, and it'll connect with our Old Testament text as well, our Hebrew Bible text. But yeah, the servants know. We don't know though if there's any, like knowing what Jesus did and believing in him seem to be not necessarily two different things. I mean, there's knowing what he did is a step to believing in him, which the disciples do. We don't hear if the servants believed. And we certainly don't get, this is not one of those miracles where the people are like, woo-hoo, look at what's happening. This is not like the feeding of the 5,000,
Yeah.
where they then follow him and Jesus says, hey, you're just here for the bread. Right? There's more to this than just the bread. And that'll happen chapter 8 or something like that of John. But the servants do know. They are the ones who have the inside scoop. The steward doesn't know, the bride doesn't know, the bridegroom doesn't know. The other guests at the party don't seem to know. There's just confusion for them. But the servants and the disciples see and know, and in the disciples' case, then believe. So that's significant. Yeah. Belief, by the way, is important in John. That's it. It is to believe. That's what Jesus came, so that you might believe. So you'll hear that and hear that and hear that and hear that again in John's gospel. Yeah.
Yes, what is
what does Jesus mean when he says, my hour has not yet come? A lot of times we think my hour has not yet come, meaning he's going to be, put on a cross
Yeah,
or whatever, but
right.
what, what does that mean? He's talking to Mary, right? His mom.
First miraculous sign.
Well, he hasn't been
Yeah.
baptized yet, has he, in this?
Yeah.
Yeah,
He
he
has-
has been now.
Well,
That,
he
yeah,
has-
so last week we got the baptism, which was a little bit before that. So yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
and granted, it was Luke, so here in John has he, yeah, but his baptism is, is done now. Yep, it's told differently in the different gospels a little bit,
Okay.
but yeah. So back to your question, though, you were
My
saying
hour-
hour has not yet come. Yes, so. Well, throughout
He
the,
didn't want to be pushed
yeah.
to do something he wasn't ready.
Yeah.
for.
Yeah, it could be that, I mean, we can talk about what his hour means, but he could be saying that in the sense that if people kind of see what I'm doing here already in this beginning of this ministry, they're gonna go, crazy and think I'm the Messiah already and that kind of thing, before I have a chance to kind of show these other signs and do these teachings and kind of construct what it is to be, what the Messiah will look like, what I am here. So that may be it, that he's just trying to keep this quiet. And that may be true also in how he acts this out. That his mom kind of puts him on the spot with, well, do whatever he tells you, and so, okay, well, now I'm still gonna keep this quiet, because my hour has not yet come. So it's helpful, I think, now to think about what Pastor Bo was saying with the Raymond Brown thing. There are signs in the first half, and then it is focused on his glory. So Jesus signs, Jesus glory. I don't know if you were in here for that, but the Gospel of John is kind of divided in a sense in Jesus signs and Jesus glory. But really, for John, out of all the Gospels, he emphasizes this the most, that the cross is the throne of Jesus. And so that's where the glory of God is revealed, is in weakness and suffering and serving. And so that's the hour that he's moving toward. The first time I believe that he says his hour has come is in John 12. And we can see that. Mary anoints Jesus, right? So that's in verse 7, he says, leave her alone. She bought it so that she might keep it for the day of my burial. So there we're getting this, these signs that this, and then there's a plot to kill Lazarus, Jesus' entry into Jerusalem. And then it says some Greeks wish to see Jesus, and they're asking, and there's sort of a telephone train to Jesus and then back. But he says in 23, Jesus answered them, the hour has come for the Son of Man to be glorified. So his hour has not yet come in chapter 2, but now in 12, his hour has come. And we get this this big slowdown. You may think, well, for chapter 12, John has 20 chapters. His hour's already come at chapter 12, but we get this huge slowdown in 13, 14, all the way through 17, and then get into the crucifixion or the trial and crucifixion and resurrection in the rest of it. So 12 through, what is it, the end of 17 is like a couple of days, so this is the time that when he finally speaks of that hour. Yeah.
Could it be that one of the main purpose of this? I like the last part of verse 11 in this, where it says, he thus revealed his glory, and his disciples put their faith in him. So he had called some disciples, at least most of them, not all of them by then, but then, so his disciples, besides the servants, his disciples see what he did.
Yeah, right,
So
yeah,
this was important that they've just been called, but now they've seen a miracle.
right.
So,
You almost get the sense that Jesus is at a table with his disciples at the wedding. I mean, I'm a visual person, so I'm always trying to construct these things visually, and sometimes I appreciate, The Chosen or other Jesus movies, and sometimes I'm like, no, that's not right. It's kind of like when I saw a cartoon that I had loved since I was 10 years old, loved Bloom County. Didn't understand it at all when I was 10, but I loved that the little penguin, I had a penguin in my car. And then they did an animated thing and I was so excited and I went to see it. And I hated it because the voices were all wrong. And I constructed those voices in my head. As you know, I have voices in my head, so. But,
Sure about that?
quiet. It's not quite that bad, but yeah, they were wrong, right? So, but I get this picture of Jesus with his disciples, or at least them close enough to him that they are able to see this as well, and
It
then,
might as well have been, since they
Yeah.
were invited along with him.
right, right.
So otherwise they probably wouldn't have been invited.
Yeah, and we don't know that there isn't a lot of focus on the family. There's really no focus on the family. The groom appears but doesn't have a line. The bride is completely
Yeah.
out of the picture. There's nothing on the wedding itself or the family that they're with or that kind of thing. However, so weddings could be, it could be an invitation to, you know, kind of the village or the town because they were connected. A lot of times people were, you know, interrelated. A small town, oftentimes in our day even. But, or it could have been family of some kind. It could have been family of Mary or Joseph or, you know, cousin of Jesus. Who knows what it was exactly? We're not given the insight into that. But they were guests, and because of that, there's an honor and a shame and a give and a take, and of course, the honor shame is really important. So running out of wine at a wedding is great shame. And you were confirming this, but my understanding was that the groom is responsible for the wine at the wedding, so that would be great shame for him to run out of wine, and maybe his family as well. Yeah.
I have a note here from another study. It's either you or Pastor Bill said this.
Mhm.
Jesus comes to a feast that is hurting and shameful, and he heals it. He foreshadows the healing that his glory on the cross will bring.
Yeah, there's a fulfillment in this of some things, for sure, and we'll look back at some of those.
I looked up yesterday and Cana is a mile from Nazareth.
Is a mile from here, yeah, so it'd be in the same kind of area.
So what's the third day? What's the first and second day? Remind me.
Where are you at?
Well, I'm just saying on the third day, so I'm trying to remember what was the first and second day.
Oh, yeah, so on the third day, there was a wedding at Cana Galilee. You know, I glossed over that before, but that's probably a resurrection reference. This is, you know, so on the third day, but yes.
There is a footnote here.
Oh, there is a footnote,
Oh.
okay,
About a
okay,
wedding. Okay.
yeah, okay,
Little is known of how a wedding was performed in first century Palestine, but clearly the feast was very important and might go on for a week.
Mhm.
To fail in proper hospitality was a serious offense.
Yeah.
So it's not one day.
So there's something
Right.
before that
It's
for
like
2
one for a whole
days and
week.
then the third day and.
Yeah, third day, and so, yeah, they
Interesting.
ran out of wine.
Right.
Yeah.
yeah, and they did go on for usually go on for multiple days. What I'm not sure of is if on the third day there was a wedding at Cana, or if this is the third day of the wedding at Cana. So I don't know if any translations of yours make it sound like this is the third day of the wedding, or that kind of thing, but really either way, if it was the third day of the wedding, or if it was the, you know, on this random third day, there was a wedding. Or whether it could be that's marking a day of the week, but I think there's a reference that John is making for us
Well,
that,
third day reminds me of Jesus rising.
Right.
On the.
Yes.
Third day has
right,
the
exactly,
other meaning,
exactly,
and that's what resonated with me.
for sure. And the number 3 is significant, it's the, you know, it's the number of heaven, and the number 4 is significant, it's the 4 corners of the earth. And
Okay.
I think we've talked about this before, 3 and 4 come together, it's a perfect number because it's heaven and earth coming together, and so, yeah. So,
Stephen
Yeah.
Paulson says that this is a reference to creation, that we've had a walk through creation in the first chapter of John. And that this is
Oh.
like, just continuing on with creation.
Oh, okay, yeah, so the creation story lays over it,
Okay.
yeah, I could see that, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. What was the third day?
Vegetation.
Vegetation, oh, yeah, okay, so. Yeah, well,
Grapes.
There you go, third day, yep, exactly, the fruit of the vine,
King James says, and the third day,
and the third day.
so that would be more like the third day of the week, right?
Yeah, it may be, yeah. But again, that creation piece would lay over that as well and that kind of thing. So yeah, on a Wednesday, there was a wedding again. Actually, it'd be, first day would be Sunday, Monday it'd be Tuesday. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, interesting. Okay. And again, John puts in lots of layers, lots of pieces for us to uncover. It's like a excavation every time you read it, John. Okay, how about other things that are sticking out here, maybe?
Well, I think his making wine is a sign of pure joy rather than misguided piety.
Oh, yeah. Are you reading that or are you saying that?
And so,
You're saying that is a sign of joy rather than misguided piety. What do you mean by that then?
well, some people who are religious live by the law and are the Pharisees, for example,
Uh-huh.
but Jesus wasn't like that.
Yeah, yeah,
Well, in fact, he turns that on its head because he's
Uh.
taken these jars of water for purification that are supposed to be part of how you're justified before God. And he's saying these are no longer needed for your justification. It's,
So he's doing something out of joy for these people, and he's letting
Yeah.
people not,
yeah.
and right, enough. Right.
And
whatever he
I
said.
thought about the end of the end of the nativity story. In the first part of John, he says, it says, from his fullness, we have all received grace upon grace. You know, and that's what, the first thing when I read the story, I just thought, grace upon grace, you know, joy and
Mhm.
it's so lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. And that piety in a sense is fulfilled in Jesus then. So the piety of the purification, that action.
Cause he
that-
defiled that water.
Yeah, he did. He did defile the purification of water and the jars and all of that kind of thing. I don't know what happens. Maybe I haven't seen this or looked it up, but maybe those jars at this point then have to be thrown away or destroyed or used for something different. if They were for purification before.
Says
So-
to 6 of them that could hold from 20 to 30.
Yeah. Yeah.
If the 20, if it
Uh-huh.
was average of 25 times 6, that's
Uh-huh.
150 gallons of wine.
150 gallons.
last the whole week.
Right. 150 gallons of wine would last our family about 6 lifetimes. so.
Yeah.
I have a note in my Bible that says that it was a headstone that could be cleansed, just because
Oh,
we
okay.
were wondering.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I don't know why they thought we needed to know
There's
that too,
deep
but
insight.
they anticipated
Yeah.
this question. They could be properly cleansed and reused.
Right,
So-
okay.
That
Well,
was
you-
interesting.
You talk about piety, so some of that, when I was first, Kim and I were gonna talk about this last week, or talked about this last week, so I was just kind of looking up some things. I just did a Google search on the story, and the first few things that came up were, was the rot wine really alcoholic? Or was it non-alcoholic wine? Right, so there's a concern among some that if Jesus changed water into wine, it would have been non-alcoholic wine. So,
That's crazy.
yeah, I think so, yeah. With all due respect to those that for whom that is important,
I don't think they even knew about non-alcoholic.
I don't know. I mean, part of the drinking of wine is it was, you know, it was safer than water a lot of times because the water
Yeah.
could carry things that I would guess if any of us went back to that time and drank the water, we might be. Yeah, and once after we got sick, we'd probably actually be healthier because it wouldn't have all the other junk in it that our water has in it, perhaps, but.
Well, then we move on to the wine. And,
Yeah.
You know, so,
Mhm.
there's just a lot of connections here.
Right, yeah, there's a connection to his resurrection, his death and resurrection, to his glory. What does that mean? There's a
And
connection
I'm
to,
this is my
communion.
belief.
Yep. yeah,
I think it's fascinating that Jesus starts out after he gets there, when his mom told him the wine was gone,
And then he says, "Dear woman, why do you involve me?
Yeah, oh, is that what it says? Dear woman,
Yeah.
why do you involve me?
My time has not yet
Yeah.
come."
I just have to think about Mary and, what an interesting life she had. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, she was his mom. I said, well, I'm my kid's mom. Do as I say, kids.
Yeah, right, right.
I'll take them by the ear and do what I say.
Yeah, yeah, like the King James version. Right, yeah, it is interesting, just I love the line, you know, do whatever he tells you, and then it just kind of moves on with Jesus moving through that. One thing to consider here too, we talk about, you know, Jesus' mom taking him by the ear, but some people are like, kind of read this, woman, what concern is that to you? Like, girl, stop bothering me, you know, kind of a thing, sort of a deal, but this term is used again. I think only one other time, perhaps, or at least in reference to his mother anyway. At the cross, when he's redefining what family will be for her now and for John, that John will take care of her. You know, woman, behold your son, behold your mother. So there's also in this, as much as it is, I'm certainly on the forefront of laughing at that whole exchange. But this really does carry a kind of intimacy and family connection and that kind of thing, which again would be the case in this wedding, even though we don't have, you know, intimate details on the groom and bride and the family and the relationship and all that kind of stuff. There is a sense of care for their honor and for these folks in a particular way too. So there's again, and there are these layers of that very pragmatic, practical thing. It's a Tuesday and we care about their honor. With the third day, what does the third day mean in the cosmic sense? And the abundance and grace of Jesus poured out. Now, what's interesting here is, yes, if you take the average, it's 150 gallons. So it's somewhere between 120 and 180 gallons of wine in the midst of a party that's already going, in the midst of the fact that the people have already had some fill of wine, right? Usually you serve this before the people have become drunk and can't, you know, don't care what the wine tastes like, et cetera, whatever. Which again is, I think you could say, well, what if they had run out of food? And it might be, well, everybody's full and now you bring out the best of the best. That, again, the kind of upper layer of that, if you want to call it that, is the abundance that comes. They're already filled with wine. They're already full. And yet now here comes even the best. And so there's a sign here that who Jesus is and all the expectations that will be had about him and all the piety that will be, you know, try to correct what he's doing. This is more, this is better, this is abundance you can't possibly imagine. Even after you're at your fullest point, it'll be poured out. It isn't enough. It's more than enough. There's a song I love in the Seder meal, the Passover meal, called Dayenu, just because it's fun to sing. Da da yenu, da da yenu. But Dayenu means enough in Hebrew. Like, it is enough. We have enough. It is enough for the day. We have enough. But this is, I don't know the Hebrew word for, you know, more than enough or overflowing. But that's the song and dance that Jesus is giving at this wedding, is overflowing more than enough.
So we might have just heard a main point of the sermon Sunday.
Maybe, we'll see.
And we want to see.
It is called abundance. Dang
A
it.
little bit of dancing along with that. When you
Somebody write that down. Yes.
When you do this
Oh, I'll do the Dayenu dance for sure. Yes, right. It'll be, yes, right. Yeah. There's actually somebody I should invite if I'm gonna do that. He can critique my Jewish dancing.
So they're used to manna, right?
They're used to
I
manna.
know.
Right, exactly. Yeah. There's nothing to eat in the fridge. Kind of that whole thing with manna.
And then they get the best, then they
right.
get
Yeah,
more.
right.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, God does that when you bring up manna, God does that in the wilderness with the quail. Like, you're gonna eat quail until you are just stuffed with quail. And you want meat, fine. And it's a little bit like God's sort of reacting in that way, but this is an abundance in a different way. A different kind different kind of thing.
Well, and for us, the best is yet to come. I
Yeah.
mean, it's a promise.
Yeah.
Well, the best is yet to
Mhm.
come, no
Yeah.
matter how best we feel,
Yeah.
we're gonna feel more.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that, because I know some people can kind of trip up on the, gosh, the guests have become drunk. What are we talking about here and that kind of thing? But it's not, that this has become an out of control rave. And Jesus is pouring more alcohol on it or something like that, but it's more that the people have become filled with the wine. And now there's the best, the abundance of more. We can look at a couple of references here in how this fulfills some pieces. If we look at, let's see, what was it? Isaiah. If we look at Isaiah 61. So pull it up on the screen here too. 61 verse 10, especially. And we'll see, and then I'm going to pull up Isaiah 25 as well. One of my favorite scriptures. Actually,
What versions?
61:10, yeah. I'll pull both of those up, but Isaiah 61:10 is, I will greatly rejoice in the Lord, my whole being shall exult in my God. For he has clothed me with the garments of salvation, he has covered me with the robe of righteousness. As a bridegroom decks himself with a garland, and as a bride adorns herself with jewels. So this kind of picture of the wedding. And in this particular text, speaking of creation, God's original intention in creation is, there are images where the bride and the groom, or the marriage is out of balance, or the man and the woman are out of balance with abuse or that kind of thing. There's imagery of that. I think it's in Hosea of because there's this image of Israel being like a bride to God, and the church being like the bride, and Christ is the bridegroom, and that imagery continues to play out. Well, that imagery reaches back into the Hebrew Bible as well, but it also reaches all the way back to the creational intention of Adam and Eve being co-partners in this creation. And so there's an equality in that as well that kind of comes out in Isaiah 61:10, and this is actually after what our text will be that we'll be looking at here in a little bit. So you have that bride and bridegroom image, and that joy, and that mutual love. I know sometimes we can get caught in the fact that well, women were property, and they were kind of almost sold to the man as the bride, and this and that and the other kind of thing. But the imagery, the ideal imagery of God's kingdom and God's creation is the joy that they have for one another, and the equality that they share with one another. Okay, let's look at 25, 6-9. Oh yeah, go ahead. You want to stop there? Yep.
So the next verse, so the Lord God will cause righteousness and praise to sprout up before, as a garden causes when the sun to sprout up, the Lord will cause righteousness and praise to sprout up before all nations. So this is sort of, the wedding of Cana is kind of like the same thing. It's this small little microcosm that becomes macro.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And again, it isn't the significance of who's getting married and what family it is. The
Yeah,
significance
it's the
is
abundance, it's the,
right.
yeah.
Right. And in some ways, it's kind of, I don't know, this just hit me, but in some ways, it's almost kind of nice that it is that way, because then it does translate to, it does translate to the macro. It does translate to us as well. Married or not, in our marriage and family, in our church, community, et cetera, all those communities that we share.
And Carrie, I just love what you said, because the focus is on relationship, like how this wine, is part of this beautiful celebration, and people are in relationship with each other, and their families being built right here through this marriage. And there's not a focus on piety, like, are you drinking too much or
right.
whatever, it's like, it's just focusing on relationship. And Jesus is at the heart of that.
Yeah.
Making that happen.
Yeah. And celebration.
I just
Joy
love what
and-
you said.
Yeah. And honor for those who would have shame, which we'll
Uh-huh.
get to more in our second reading.
Yeah.
Or in our first reading for Sunday. Yeah, absolutely. It covers a lot of that. If we look at 25, then Isaiah 25, 6-9. This is used a lot you probably heard it at memorial, for funerals and memorial services. It says, on this mountain, the Lord of hosts will make for all peoples a feast of rich food, a feast of well-aged wines, a feast of rich food filled with marrow, of well-aged wine strained clear. And he will destroy on this mountain the shroud that is cast over all the peoples, the covering that is spread over all nations. He will swallow up death forever. And the Lord God will wipe away the tears from all faces, and the disgrace of his people he will take away from all the earth. For the Lord has spoken. It will be said on that day, see, this is our God. We have waited for him so that he might save us. This is the Lord for whom we have waited. Let us be glad and rejoice in his salvation. So, and then we trod down on the Moabites, but the original, the image here is of all these nations kind of streaming towards the mountain of God for a feast where they will eat abundantly of good things. God will chew on and swallow up death forever. So the shroud, so God's eating a shroud of death and people are eating. So and again, we can see in that imagery, and again, this might bubble up for the disciples or some who would see, oh, this is what God is doing in this sign and wonder of the wedding at Cana. It is unique to John, by the way, this wedding, but a rich story nonetheless. Yeah. Okay. Other thoughts or?
The reason I like the King James Bible is because the jars contain 2 or 3 firkins apiece.
Firkins.
Oh,
Firkin.
yeah. Yep, that's right.
is
The
that?
best frickin' wine you've ever had.
Yeah.
Stop recording. Okay. We had that in our staff song for Kim on Friday. We always come up with a spoof song for at our staff party. We said smart as a Ute, whatever the hell that is. She was a Utah Ute. What is a Ute, by the way?
An Indian,
Oh, it is?
the Indian tribe.
Oh, it is?
UTE.
Oh, now I feel bad. Okay, all right. All right,
But the teams are running Utes and they got permission from the tribe
They
to
did.
use it.
okay, good. Yeah, right.
I'll
Yeah,
take it.
that's cool. Yeah, actually, it's a badge of honor there. Okay, few other things in here that I wanna kind of see if we've covered all of our pieces, and maybe we have. Let me look here because there is a really good, I think, that Brian Peterson does a really good job with this. If you go to Working Preacher and wanna read more about this, he does note that right before this, as the disciples are being gathered up, which they are pretty quickly in John's Gospel in the first chapter there, that Jesus promises Nathanael as one of the disciples that he will see greater things. Here we are in chapter 2, and we get this first sign. So it doesn't take long for Jesus to show them these great things. Yeah.
Was that his very first miracle?
Yeah, it is. First sign, yeah. Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, we talked about mother being addressed, or woman as from the cross. Yeah, there are also references in Joel about the abundance promised on this great day. It does say that a core in what is it, in Baruch 29, it says 1 vine will be 1,000 branches, and 1 branch will produce 1,000 clusters, and 1 cluster will produce 1,000 grapes, and 1 grape will produce a core, which is about 50 gallons. So maybe that's a connection to what you were talking about here as well. Yeah. So he says something kind of interesting here, and I think this is probably a key part too. He says the relationship between sign and faith in John's gospel is not simple. We were talking about this a little bit, but this is a key part to this gospel, to this reading. Here it may seem rather straightforward. The disciples witness the sign and it leads to faith. Yet at the end of chapter 2, there is some hesitation about those who believe because they have seen signs. Seeing the signs does not automatically lead to believing at all. And piety, as you get back to your comment, may get in the way of that for us sometimes, right? At the wedding, in some mysterious way, it seems that properly seeing the sign also requires faith. The servants know where the wine has come from, yet they apparently do not see the glory of Jesus in this event, or at least we don't get a story of it. They are not explicitly said to believe. The glory remains hidden from most at the wedding. Yes, but not the disciples, for sure. So, he has a conclusion here that I think is interesting too. It will not be difficult for preachers to find examples of where our resources run short, intruding even into what should be joyous times of life. Shortfalls in finances, health, patience, compassion, and hope can all threaten to empty the celebration. What then is the glory that we see revealed? As in this story, we may find that the flashy, miraculous is underplayed and hidden, yet the glory of Christ is revealed in love, in service, in community, in grace. And then he notes there's no transfiguration story in John. Instead, Jesus' glory is seen all through his ministry and is especially revealed as he is glorified in his death and resurrection. There, the wine overflows for us too, as you pointed out. So, yeah, anyway, a little taste of that commentary, and there's more in there, much of which we discussed today.
So that's a little piece of this too, is that
Mhm.
this is the second week of Epiphany, right?
Yeah.
It's the
Right.
second week,
Mhm.
so this is a manifestation of his glory.
Yeah.
Right.
Right, it is. Yeah. It is, yes.
Usually, doesn't Epiphany usually end with the transfiguration?
And it will,
Mhm.
but not in John.
No,
Because John doesn't have
Yeah.
it, yeah. Yeah, which I always forget. I always think John has the transfer. It seems like a John type of
seems
a
like it
story.
should.
Yeah, you'd think John would have the transfiguration because he likes those, Jesus knows everything, sees everything, and that
Maybe
kind of
it's
thing.
too obvious.
Yep, perhaps, yeah. John keeps the transfiguration, the light on Jesus the whole time
Mm.
here, that he knows what people are thinking and he discerns what's gonna happen and all of that kind of thing. Okay. All right, any more dead horses in here to beat? Okay,
I think that,
or do you have insights? Yeah. from
well,
some
I
stuff
think
that you're
that in
preparing.
the, like thinking about creation and thinking about what Jesus does with sacraments, where he creates something out of nothing, or he takes the ordinary and transforms it. I think there's a big, something in here about that too, like he takes ordinary lives and transforms them.
Yeah.
And, I don't know,
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing to take out here.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think very much so. And I think that's kind of there in the.
The word becomes flesh, water becomes wine. God's presence is transformational. He meets us where we are and transforms us.
Mhm.
This is something I had written here.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and it's a reversal for God, and it's a reversal down for God, emptying himself into the flesh, the word becomes flesh. But,
And then it's a divination, I know that word divinization is sort of floated, but it's sort of the, giving good thing, emptying himself and giving us those good things.
right, yeah. Yeah, Pastor Bill likes to talk about the happy exchange a lot of times, takes all of our sin and gives us all of his righteousness. There's a little bit of that in these reversals that God empties or takes on. And again, that goes back to Isaiah 25. God eats a dinner of death, and we eat a feast of all good things.
And then I think when we take that out to the world, like I'm gonna use, there's a quilting ministry at Spirit of Life, and they use the littlest, tiniest scraps. They don't waste anything. And they piece together these quilts that go out to the world,
Yeah.
and just take these little ordinary things and create these extraordinary things from them. And that ministry has a feeding program and a food bank, and so they, it's like loaves and fishes stuff. It's a very tiny congregation, but they are able to do these amazing things that then go on to transform other people's lives,
Where is that?
Spirit of Life
Yeah.
in Port Orchard, it's Marietta's church.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yep. Yeah, they've got a really neat ministry going on over there for sure.
I wonder what the bridegroom thought when the master. Master
Yeah.
of the banquet told them
Right,
boy, you've saved the best wine till last. 'Cause the
Yeah.
bridegroom probably knew that they were running out.
yeah. Yeah,
And all of a sudden,
you might have been sweating.
yeah.
We did this story in, for VBS one year. We did a song from is it Encanto? Yeah, Encanto, the animated Disney deal. And it's a song called We Don't Talk About Bruno. And we did the water turned to wine, story. The Pharisees always came in, we don't talk about Jesus, instead of we don't talk about Bruno. They wanted to silence everybody, but they were like, he did this and he did that. And so there's a wedding in Encanto that they think Bruno has ruined because he's spoken these things into it, which, you know, you find out it wasn't, he was just trying to warn them of something coming. But we took that wedding and made it into the wedding at Cana, so it's fun. We do it from the bridegroom's perspective, pretty much. And so he's fretting and worried that he's gonna be, you know, the laugh or the talk of the town because of that. But again, that bridegroom's honor becomes the macro of Jesus will give honor to all, will clothe us in Christ's righteousness. Yeah. Okay. Let's look at our first reading. That will be from Isaiah 61 or 62, excuse me. 1 through 5. So this is actually after what we read in 61. In fact, I might just take that. And let's jump through all of that. 62 here. That way we can see what's before and after as well. A little bit. So 60 to 62 is all part of 56 to 66. The end of Isaiah is the third Isaiah of what the fancy word I think is Trito Isaiah or something like that, but it's in 3 parts. So there, and probably 3 writers. One is prior to the exile, one is kind of, you know, in the exile and into the post, and then the last part is post-exilic. We're back, and now what? Kind of a thing. So there's a lot of gloom and doom in the first part, there's a lot of promise in the second part, and then there's a lot of what does the flesh on this promise look like, you know, as it gets down to brass tacks kind of stuff, or nuts and bolts kind of stuff, as they're back. And so this is the end of Isaiah. And the end, there's a section in 60 to 62 that's very similar. We're kind of getting to the end of that. So this abundance of the bride and the bridegroom and all of that kind of stuff. So a lot of symbolism in here that reverses, and again, a reversal or an exchange for what was given in the first part of Isaiah. Okay, let's take a look at that. Verse 1 through 5. Someone want to read that for us?
I can read it.
Okay.
For Zion's sake, I will not keep silent, and for Jerusalem's sake, I will not be quiet, until her righteousness goes forth as brightness, and her salvation as a burning torch. The nations shall see your righteousness, and all the kings your glory. And you shall be called by a new name that the mouth of the Lord will give. You shall be a crown of beauty in the hand of the Lord, and a royal diadem in the hand of your God. You shall no more be termed forsaken, and your land shall no more be termed desolate. But you shall be called, my delight is in her, and your land married. For the Lord delights in you, and your land shall be married. For as a young man marries a young woman, so shall your sons marry you. And as the bridegroom rejoices over the bride, so shall your God rejoice over you.
Okay. Yes, so again, we get that rejoicing and that imagery of marriage and bride and bridegroom, and again, we got that just in the previous chapter as well. So yeah, so how do you maybe connect this, or what do you see here? kind of looking at this text. What should I read here?
I just love this image of the people being the bride,
Mhm.
you know, and I was thinking about this in terms of the wedding at Cana, just focusing on wine, like wine doesn't speak to everybody, you know, but I love good wine. I
Mhm.
love fine wine, so it speaks to me. And having been a bride and understanding what that, you know, just from that perspective of being a young bride as a woman, well, I wasn't that young, but, you know, and all that entailed and those early years of marriage, you know, the honeymoon period and stuff like that, you know, the intimacy between people, and I don't just mean like sexual intimacy, but I mean just that intimate knowledge of each other and that love and that, and just to think that that's how our God is relating to us, is that joyful time and, yeah, just that, intimacy,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, the Hebrew word of knowing. Is used for, it's used for the sexual intimacy of a couple, but it's also used, the same word is used for how God knows us.
Yeah.
Kind of inside and out,
Mhm.
yeah, and it's used for other kinds of intimacy as well, as you say, the kind of the spectrum of that. Mhm. Absolutely, yeah,
So I don't know how this language speaks to a man, you know, thinking of himself as a bride. I mean, hopefully they,
yeah, right.
you know, hopefully. But I mean, do you see what I'm saying? It's like this perspective of
Mhm.
having actually felt that.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, yep, no, I think so. And again, you get that mutuality of joy.
mhm, it's
Yeah,
delight,
man.
you know, these words,
Delight.
delight and rejoicing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
they're not small things.
Yeah.
Yep. There are names for, these words. Married is, the word is Beulah. So if you've ever known a
Oh,
Beulah, that's what Beulah's name means. Not a super popular name now, but sometimes these older classic names come back. And then Hephzibah, I had to look that one up, but my delight is in her. So you should be called Hephzibah and Beulah. And it does, to your point, after that, saying this new identity, the relationship between God and Jerusalem is as intimate as that between bride and bridegroom. Can you contrast some of what you're hearing here from what you know of First Isaiah, or if you know of First Isaiah?
so did you say this is the end of second or the start of third?
This is kind of actually, it's towards the end of third. Because it's 6 chapters,
Oh, it is.
almost in the middle.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost in the middle. 6 chapters from the start of third Isaiah and 4 chapters away from the end of it. Yeah.
So it's the exile, kind of the whole,
What's that?
it is, are you talking about the idea of being forsaken and desolate and how that relates to exile?
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a piece of it. Yeah, these names that were given to Jerusalem. Yeah. And if we look in that first Isaiah part, it's, you know, there's imagery. Again, with the wine, the beautiful vineyard, well, the gates will be torn down. And the wild animals will stomp around in it, and it will produce thorns instead of fruit. And there's imagery of desolation and destruction. And what was the other name? Desolate and forsaken. So the protection is gone. The imagery of that vineyard and the gates being down is kind of like the Babylonians just rushing in and taking over. But then also the thorns coming up is the desolation, is the, of the, of the people and their unfaithfulness as well. So there'll be imagery there too, also of a, you know, basically of a bride, going off with someone else rather than her husband. So that imagery comes up, and it comes up throughout the prophets around this exilic period.
So it's transformation again.
Yeah, and it is that imagery of wedding and land at the same time. too.
Wedding and land.
Land,
Mhm.
the fruitfulness of the land compared and put together with. the
Oh, yeah, for
wedding.
sure,
And
yeah,
I remember we read a interpretation of Song of Solomon that actually said it's the same thing. There is actually a way to look at Song of Solomon as not just being relational, but it's actually a redemption and a bringing forth of the land into that. So maybe it's the same pattern.
Yeah.
Thematic pairing of those images.
right, yeah, you have these typologies that continue to go through these patterns of these images that continue on through. Yeah, that's interesting, yeah, so that's Song of Solomon is a sort of romance book in a sense.
Yes.
But the romance is as much of God and the land and the people in the land as it is.
Yeah,
this
because there's a
one.
lot of agricultural imagery. That whole thing is taking place in a garden and it's all,
Sure,
yeah.
Yeah.
It was just, I'd never read it that way before. And when
Yeah.
you do, it actually goes, oh, I think that actually
that's
will
cool,
be there.
that's cool.
And if it's already done in other places, that even speaks
Yeah.
more to that.
You start to find those patterns. Was that in a class that you were taking? Seminary class? Yeah, very cool. Love it. Yeah. There's something else that starts this passage off that was, if you remember what God more would not do than do in the first part of Isaiah.
Or in Isaiah 62 now or somewhere else.
Well, in the first part of Isaiah, God says that, I mean, it's kind of harrowing stuff. In fact, I remember reading it in here before. And sometimes it comes up in Lent or Advent or things like that, but basically that the people will try to see and they'll be blinded, and the people will try to hear and they won't be, I'll put stoppers in their ears and they won't be able to find me. I will be silent and I will be absent. That's the understanding of the people of this exilic period, is that God is silent and God is absent. And in fact, the exile itself, we don't have a lot of stuff. And I've said this before, a lot of commentators say because of how horrible it was, but also because there's a sense of silence. Like this is a silent time in the history of God's people. I wouldn't be surprised, I don't know of this, but I wouldn't be surprised if somewhere in Jewish, you know, tradition and practice, there's something where there's a silence taken. Could be for the Holocaust, you know, more recent history, or could be this, or it could be a combination of these things, being in slavery. I'm trying to remember if there's something in the Seder meal that's where there's a time of silence or a time of mourning or something like that, but maybe somebody else knows that. But anyway, there is this silence, and now we not only get that God is talking, but it says, for Zion's sake, I will not keep silent, and for Jerusalem's sake, I will not rest until her vindication shines out like the dawn and her salvation like a burning torch. So all this, again, darkness to light, shining, burning torches, silence to lots of noise.
Yeah.
Speaking of noise, I will leaf blow for the nations. That's right. It might be that pesky one that's down the ground. It's right outside. Yes, and so there's a reversal of what God has done. But there's also a reversal, certainly of the name, you know, that the land shall be called desolate and the people shall be forsaken. But there's also the nations shall see your vindication, and all the kings your glory. And you shall be called by a new name that the mouth of the Lord will give. This isn't just, all right, we're back. Let's return to the old practices. There's something new here. There's something fresh here. It's not just about a man and a woman either in this bride and bridegroom. It's a young man and a young woman. Okay. There's something going on here that is delightfully new. And as I read this passage and I kind of think about this, you know, Pastor Bill's been focusing on the de-churching of America, and You know, what are some of the signs, what are some of the reasons, that kind of thing. I think as we've been looking at that, now it is to maybe ask ourselves as a church, well, what is God doing that is fresh and new? What is God calling us to now? What will we look like for the sake of the community, you know, the community around us, where 50% of the population, what did he say, we're one of 3 counties in the nation that has the rate of no affiliation with any religious organization at all. Yeah, we're like tied for first with the with the least religious counties, which surprises me a little bit, gets at. Maybe that's because some of the military residency is somewhere else, so I think that might be a little skewed. But yeah, there's incredible loss, but also incredible opportunity. What does the thing look like for a church that God is restoring? If God still works in this way, we still believe and trust that God works in this abundant way. I think it's it'd be kind of a cool text for us to hold before us, because we can talk about, yeah, I wish it was like that. Maybe we just need to get back to, and maybe we just need to do this again. And maybe some of those things are true, but what is the new thing that God is doing? Even if it does harken back to the baby with the bathwater. How is that fresh and new, and what does that look like for us? How do we think about that? So anyway, because it'd be easy for the people to say, oh man, everything's just broken down, we got to rebuild everything, and or to say, we have to get it right, we have to get it like this, have to get it like that, because that's how it was before. God does some fresh and new things with the people in a new way. They'll never be a nation in the rest of the biblical history, an independent nation. So, and that's unfortunate, but what does it look like now to be blessed, to be a blessing? How does that relate to the land, but also go beyond that?
I think God is calling us to be a blessing in new ways, not going back to the old way of saying to my kids, you gotta go to church. That's what I'm learning, a new way of being Christian. And this adds, I think he's speaking to us in new ways. And I think there's something amazing in store. And I just have great faith and hope that we're gonna blossom.
Right.
In some way. I don't know how to explain that. I just sense it.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's great. I love that faith and optimism. You said something I wanted to.
Sorry,
That's okay. Pick up on, but that's okay. Yeah, no, I think it was, my parents were like, I never said, when they said go to church, I never said why, or why do I have to? I just went. And it's both a more difficult question to answer, but it's also not a bad question to ask. Why? And if you can't answer that question, and if you're going and you can't answer that question, then it's a good question for you to ask yourself too. Why should someone go to church? What's the point? Why does it matter? Does it matter? Those are all harder questions, but they're important ones to ask. So, and they're the ones that maybe we should ask rather than, was the wine really alcoholic, or that kind of thing. So I think those are the more important questions that we get to ask. And there's opportunity and there's joy in that, right? You answered that question, otherwise you wouldn't be in seminary. Because why would you go with if it's just run its course and the cultural nightclub of church is dead? Then let's just let it die.
Change is part of life.
When
That's what it means to grow. And so unless you're looking for that opportunity to change and looking at everything that's chaotic as I'm not digging in, I mean, you certainly have a foundation.
Sure.
But the church is built on the capacity to shift from one set of religious traditions into something new. And I think that there's certain things that have to be there, but it survives change because it's true. The things that are supposed to be there will survive change, and in fact, promote change without everything falling apart. And we all know as we get older, you certainly you stick with some things as a foundation, but unless, like, my husband is so encouraging. His words of encouragement to me are adapt or die.
Okay. I wasn't sure if you were being sarcastic at first, but that sounds pretty good.
He's a health and well-being coach at the Y. And
Oh, yeah, there you go.
he'll say, okay, if you cannot actually adapt to something that has taken you out and you just stay at that level, you will not thrive, but you
Yeah.
can come back stronger if you actually embrace the fact that things have to change.
Right.
And look at where, for us, look at where God is leading each of us to make those changes. It's really hard though, gotta say. Just
Yeah.
like it would be to come back after a hip replacement. It's really hard.
Yeah.
And it does take community that's willing to change with you and go through that process and
Right.
say, yeah. How are we gonna do that?
Yeah. And it's interesting too, sometimes to see just how much even the community that's maybe connected in different ways, and it's not Manna or worship or youth night or choir or whatever, quilters or whatever things might be going on here, but they're maybe here for scouts or they're for this or that. I was reading this story about this woman who's been called on many times to come into really struggling historic churches. There's massive buildings in New York City, and she's in big cities, New York City, I think maybe Washington DC as well, but especially New York and different boroughs and neighborhoods. And one of the things that she does is she goes in there and isn't afraid to say to folks that are not just, you need to pay rent because you're using this facility, but to say that we have this goal and we want to share that with the community that uses this space. And will you join us in that? And it's incredible. People are like, she said, there've been stories of people giving like a monthly offering. Whereas maybe some of the members aren't able to do that, or they're giving a monthly offering to a church they don't go to. Because it's important in their community in a particular way. But then that also will sometimes lead to a conversation about why is this important to you? And then that leads to some greater involvement. And so sometimes those in all the cases with her, the congregations have grown. Sometimes they're down to 20 and then they get up to 80, which isn't huge, but it's sustainable for that place to continue to be have light in that place and to be set for whatever that exciting thing is for God to do. And I definitely see the church sometimes going after the new in a way that just is the baby does go, and there's just new bathwater and it's just as dirty as the old or just as messed up. And I see where that's just like, nope, the bathwater is the baby. I won't pour any of it out. So finding that space between can be important. So anyway, I didn't necessarily mean to get off on that, but it struck me as we're reading this. Yeah. All right. Thoughts? On anything we've been talking about. This has a kind of, not kind of, I gotta stop saying that. My dad calls me on it every time. Is it kind of, or is it? This is a text that is also really has a sense of how to say that, but almost an election of those who are on the side of desolation, or it's a word to the downtrodden, it's a word to the left out, it's a word to what I sometimes used to call the shadow people, the ones we don't have to see if we don't want to. And so, because that's really where Israel is coming from. And so this is definitely a connection and intimacy and identity with God's people, God's chosen people, but it also carries then into those who would find themselves on the side of the oppressed, because the reversals here are pretty incredible. And so this can be a sign of hope, for those who are seen on the outside. These are the kind of texts that I think of, or that make me think of, people who were enslaved in this country and would hear their masters read the scriptures to them. And some of those folks were, in light of the terribleness of the situation. Were maybe very benevolent and that kind of thing, but there was a sense overall that the people who were enslaved, from what I've heard of some of this history and telling, started to hear these things in this story. This is for the desolate. This is for the one on the outside. This is for the, even in our gospel story today, the servants knew. Oh, the servants knew, because they're the ones involved in the real work of that started to register and God's word started to speak, even if whether or not the master was benevolent or not, even whether they proof texted, things that justified the slavery, the unjustness of slavery, whatever it might have been, there was a hearing in that and a studying in that, that overcame the slavery itself. And so this would be one of those texts where, as it's heard by those who are on the outs, it calls them to the end. God can't stop.
Makes me think of
yeah,
the homeless people.
Yeah. Sure.
That you see all over the place.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of them right now
Mhm.
as I read this and.
Yeah, sure, sure. Yeah, yeah. And it definitely relates to God's people and the particular promise and story that God has with them for sure. But that story then becomes very expansive. And of course, as we see what Jesus does with this promise, and when he's challenged by the piety to hold on to that, even his own disciples, he just
'Cause they
shoves it
wanted
out.
him-
He cannot keep silent with his actions or with his
They
words.
wanted him at some point to be the king.
Yeah, sure.
No.
No, not doing that.
I'm
Yeah.
not doing that.
Yeah, right. Assigned to the kings, rather, for sure. So there's some, justice and justification and reversal and lots of things that are through this story. And if you read all of kind of that section 60 to especially 60 to 62, it's just filled with that beauty and grace. Yeah. Okay. One last one. I don't have 4 this week, but I thought it was good. We almost never do 4 readings, but last week Pastor Bill chose all 4 and a couple of them were short, which was good, but I just thought they all gave great insight into the whole deal. Okay, so not 2, 1 to 11, but 12, 1 to 11 here for 1 Corinthians. 1 Corinthians 12, 1 to 11. Yeah. I'll throw the text in there. That. Ooh, I might, after we read this, I might have you do something that we did with the preschoolers at chapel today. Yeah, that might be kind of fun. Sure.
Now concerning spiritual gifts, brothers, I do not want you to be uninformed. You know that when you were pagans, you were led astray to mute idols, however you were led. Therefore, I want you to understand that no one speaking in the Spirit of God ever says Jesus is accursed, and no one can say Jesus is Lord except in the Holy Spirit. Now there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit, and there are varieties of service, but the same Lord, and there are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who empowers them all and everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good, for to one is given through the Spirit the utterance of wisdom, and to another the utterance of knowledge according to the same Spirit, to another faith by the same Spirit, to another gifts of healing by the one Spirit, to another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another the ability to distinguish between spirits, to another various kinds of tongues, to another the interpretation of tongues. All these are empowered by one and the same Spirit, who apportions to each one individually as he wills.
Right.
Unfortunately, none of them is turning water into wine.
Right. Just making administrators and prophets and teachers. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, fairly familiar text. But yeah. What are you picking up here?
What are you
Last 10
going
minutes.
to make us do
What am I gonna make you do? Oh, now you're just all scared?
Students.
Well, you can put it off by making a comment on what you think about this text. I'm gonna make you sing.
Quick, come on.
I'm gonna make you sing and do some actions. Plus, when you walk by chapel on your way out of lunch, you can chuckle. Cause you'll see I'm doing the same thing.
Well, it's reassuring that don't all have to be the same in our expression of faith.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah.
reassuring.
Definitely, yeah.
Now, I wrote down what you said, when you first started talking about Isaiah. You said that these verses are putting the flesh on the promise,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
to each is given the manifestation of the Spirit. Like, how does the Spirit infleshed in you?
Yeah, right. Yeah, this is a clothed with Christ kind of
Uh-huh.
text, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right, for sure. Yeah, and what you were saying too about about the word becoming flesh, but then also flesh abiding in the word.
Mhm.
So, yeah, being an elevation, so it's,
Isn't this Paul saying I'm the boss? And
also.
here's what you do.
I'm the CEO and
Yeah.
these are your,
Yeah, these are your jobs.
oh.
Here's what you do with,
Ah,
here's what you do with.
here's what you do with, yeah. Yeah. I think the king just had a lisp.
I think it's reassuring that, I mean, these are kind of highfalutin gifts that they're talking about here. But
Mhm.
it's reassuring that not everybody has the same
Yeah.
gift, whatever it might be.
Speaking of preschools, by the way, or were you gonna say more? Were you pausing?
No, oh, I was just thinking about the other places where he says, some people are administrators and some people
Right.
are teachers and some people are, but you're all part of one body.
Right, yeah, he's a little more specific in that spot. Yeah, you made me think of we had a mental health worker at preschool, at our Head Start preschool, and she said, she was talking to mostly the teachers, but saying, sometimes you're gonna get a kid who's just like, is just not doing anything right, they're not following any direction, they're just on your last nerve. And she said, what I want you to do is look at them, maybe I said this here before, but look at them and say, oh, Travis is always a squirrely name, so I'll pick that one, but Travis, I love the way that you breathe, how the air goes in and out. She said, because everybody breathes. So you can at least start at the basics and start to like, they were big on building your kids' self-esteem. And so like, just build their self-esteem from the fact that they're just a great breather, how the air goes in and out of their lungs.
You metabolize so well.
Yeah, right. You metabolize, right. Your heart beats. I love the way your heart's beating. I love the way your brain autonomically up into the rest of your body. But yeah, so she would kind of start there. But yeah, sometimes gifts are seen as oh, it's nothing, or I don't have anything to give, or I don't have it. And I go back to that article I read about this pastor. I think that's part of what she does too, is acknowledges those gifts. And I think sometimes we as the church too could be like, oh, I don't want to bother, or I'm just gonna do it myself, or and it's important to unwrap those kinds of things. So I'm convinced that's why the 5 p.m. service on Christmas Eve grows, is because and the kids love it too, as they get up and they share their gifts, and they pretty much are running the whole show. So and every year I think, gosh, we got to do more of that. And then I get to the next year and think, gosh, we didn't do enough of that. But anyway, go ahead.
I think it's important to give credit to God for our gifts too. Sometimes, I'm proud of the things that I've been able to do well.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm learning not to glorify them in them, but to thank God. Thank you for letting me do that, for helping me do blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
whatever it was. I was an occupational therapist in the school district for
Right.
32 years.
Yeah.
And I credit God for opening those doors for me and helping me do the job. I'm not saying I always credited God though.
Oh, no.
And
Yeah.
so this kind of reminds me where those gifts come from.
Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of us spend our lives too. That's good to hear, because I think a lot of it, self-critical on this sometimes, like, look what I did, look what I did, look what I did. This didn't work out. God, why? Where are you? Why aren't you, you know? And I mean, I'm not talking about God, you know, punishing us because we haven't been giving credit to God, but it can be easy in the difficult times to look to God, but not always to give that credit or just take stock, just take that breath and say, wow, I can do this because of Christ who gives me these gifts, Spirit who gives me these gifts, and to see it in that way. And I think that goes back to our gospel too. People saw, but the disciples believed.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we take that pause.
I love the way you turn good air into bad air.
Yeah.
Oh.
You're still on that. That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Can
I
you?
love how you're feeding the trees and the plants with the air that comes out.
Your carbon dioxide is just really
Just-
so effective.
Just Amazing. Amazing. Yeah, because you are suffocating me right now. Wait, no, go back.
Sucking all the air.
You're sucking the life out of me. Yeah, your carbon dioxide is sucking the life out of me. Nope, that's not right. Yep. Go ahead.
I had a child in the Sunday school class who was terrible.
Yeah.
And I talked to the superintendent and she said, "I'll tell his mother that we really enjoy having him here."
Uh-huh.
And I did that. And she wanted to know more.
Uh-huh.
Like, how are you getting these results?
Well, I want more of the story, yeah. Yeah, did she want to know how you're getting the results? Did she want to know if you knew who she really was? Because I've gotten that before. I don't think you know who my child is. Yeah. That's funny, Terry. Well, I'm sure many generations blessed by your presence here. Yeah, we were talking about, you know, it's interesting how the Spirit does work a variety of ways. And we had this devotion at council on a mustard seed and, you know, who's been kind of a mustard tree, you know, kind of sheltered you and helped you and mentored you and, or even planted that seed in you. Okay, or is there someone you've done that for? And that was the devotion for the night. We all went around and told 90% of how people who've been a mustard tree for us. And then, kid you not, and I was not scrolling Instagram, but this notification came up and I happened to look at it after my report. And this young person who I haven't heard from for a decade, it's like on this anniversary of a mutual friend, another youth who died at 28, pretty tragically. She's like, on the anniversary of his death, I was just thinking about the church and all the welcome I received there and my family did. And just, you know, she did say, you know, she talked about me a little bit, Pastor Bill, but then she talked about, but in the same breath, all the adults were just so gracious and welcoming and kind to us and just was like, loud. And it's like that you could watch the mustard bush growing right there. And then I'm back in Kitsap and I, you know, love to connect and just really cool. You know, kind of thinking this kid went through and did the confirmation thing and did that, and then poof, off they go. And now coming back from going off to college, living on the other side of the water, and then now back in this area. And even the parents, you know, I don't see them at all anymore. But for this young person to reconnect was just really cool. But to name all of that mustard bush of this congregation, you know, sometimes even with all these individual gifts, and they can be different, when they get put together, you can see just something incredible too, that we aren't. Reminds you of the guy, the teacher from CK High School who would come to baccalaureate and he'd have a stick and he'd say, "What is this?" He said, "It's a stick." And then I think he showed a tree or something like that and said, what is this? It's a branch. So what's the difference between a stick and a branch? A branch is connected. And so he would beautifully talk to these young people about as they go off to college. Don't be a stick. Don't just disconnect from everything. Be connected. Be part of the tree still. Continue that rooted and grounded in love kind of sense. And so there are different leaves on these branches, but we're all connected to this tree too. And I think that's the boss, to answer Your silly question, sir. That's the boss. That's Paul's trying to get us to. So, good. Okay, any final thoughts or closing words or? Okay, gosh, 3 sermons in these texts. You could go lots of places with these. But let's pray. Thank you, God, for this time together and for the beauty of your spirit and the abundance of your grace that we know through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you
Yes.
so much.
Thank you for that. I was always told by my professor